straight into it, guys. The full guide on recovery in Calisthenics Explained. You should have watched the prerequisite video, which was on fatigue in Calisthenics Explained. Watch that first, come back to this video. But now we're gonna talk about recovery strategies for calisthenics specifically. What ones are there? What ones work? Which ones are gimmicky? What should you prioritize? We're gonna cover all of that in today's video to help propel your planche, static, dynamic, and calisthenics performance. So guys, I know some of you would have clicked on this video because you had some kind of nagging injury due to calisthenics. So for those of you training the planche, I know loads of you would have gotten wrist pain or even still have forearm pain whenever you do the planche, or you do the planche, you get out of your set, you get that shooting pain up your forearm. We've all been there. So in this video, I'm not gonna focus too much on those injuries because that's a different video. That's all about prehabilitation and rehabilitation. However, I am gonna answer what I do to kind of get past these injuries so I can continue training, continue that overload training, and continue with the regular recovery. So the first thing I'm gonna say is if that wrist pain or forearm pain has been chronic, you've been getting it for months, you need to see a specialist. If it's just been, you know, a couple days, couple weeks, then these are the things I would be doing. So the first thing I do is I try and see if I can carry on with training, because I don't want to be losing that kind of progress I've made just due to these nagging injuries. A lot of times, some of these injuries can be worked around. So the first thing I'll do is I'll switch my grip. So if I'm training planche and I'm usually doing it on the parallel, you know, regular grip, I'll maybe try supinated grip instead. So do I still get the wrist pain in my supinated grip? If I do, maybe I'll try pronated. I'll try and find a grip where I'm not getting that pain anymore. And well, that means I can keep training without aggravating the injury. If I find that I'm using that grip, that different grip, and it's getting worse, well, I stop right there. As soon as I feel it getting worse, I stop. You don't want to aggravate that kind of injury. Next thing is if you switch your grip and you're still getting the pain, you know, maybe you're aggravating it a little bit, completely stop. The next thing I'll try is just a different exercise. Maybe I won't do complete planche holds. Box assisted Maltese, that is a great exercise that you can do if you're having wrist problems or even forearm problems. You're just using your box or parallettes and then doing presses. You can do your holds. It's basically getting the end parts of your arms out of the equation. So it's a great exercise. If that doesn't work, what I will try again is maybe to switch the apparatus I'm training on. If I'm training planche again, maybe instead of using parallette, I'll use the floor. I'll go to the floor or do fingertip planche, work on that planche leans on the floor. So those are the things I'll do to tackle injuries and help my recovery from those injuries. But that deserves its own video. So let's get on with recovery strategies for general training. As always on this channel, we start off with the definition. So what is the definition of recovery? Recovery is the return of physiological systems to baseline, which results in a restoration of athletic performance. You will then be able to productively carry out overloading training once again. Recovery helps your body reach a recovered state. So the main thing to take from this is all the recovery strategies, all they're trying to do and accomplish is to get you back into training productively. And what do we mean by productively? What we mean is we're carrying on overload training. What is overload training? Overload training means we're progressively making something harder, either in terms of volume or intensity usually. So we're either adding sets or we're adding some kind of increase in intensity. So like for example, in the planche, maybe using a band, maybe you're going from a heavy band to a slightly lighter band. That's an increase in intensity because you have to really hold up more of your body weight. So in calisthenics, when we say we're fully recovered, that's what we mean. We're now able to continue training at a certain assistance level and increase the number of sets. So making it harder that way by increasing the volume, or increasing the intensity by reducing the amount of assistance, or increasing the amount of body weight we have to hold up ourselves. Now let's go on to talk about neural adaptations for strength, which we've talked about before on the channel, but if you haven't, here's a quick overview of what neural adaptations for strength, which is what we usually do in calisthenics, so let's go over that quickly. Neural adaptations for strength is the improvement of systems above baseline after overload training, making the system more capable. And in calisthenics, more capable means we can either hold up more of our body weight or we can do more sets at a certain body weight or certain assistance level. Okay, so now we know what recovery is, and now we know what adaptations are. But how people usually think about training is in the gym, that's when they get stronger, which isn't actually true. You actually get stronger due to recovery, because by recovery, you're able to create these adaptations. Your body then adapts following recovery, and then you come back stronger. So you don't actually get stronger in the gym. That's just the stimulus. You actually get stronger when you have fully recovered, or recover to a level where you come back with increased performance. So it's two sides of the same coin for improvement in calisthenics. You need the recovery and you need the stimulus from the training. Two sides of the same coin. However, to throw something else into the mix that makes it a little bit more confusing is that recovery does not always mean increased adaptations. And we'll talk more about that in a bit, but just keep that in mind. Recovery does not guarantee adaptations. There's more that needs to go into it, which we'll talk about soon. The volume landmarks. So there are 5 volume landmarks, and they are maximum recoverable volume, minimum effective volume, maximum adaptive volume, maintenance volume, and junk volume. Maximum recoverable volume is the highest volume of training an athlete can carry out and still recover to continue overload training in the next session. So for example, if you train above your MRV, your maximum recoverable volume, then you're not going to be able to recover, so you won't be able to progressively overload and make that training harder, so you are effectively wasting your time if you want to increase your strength. Minimum effective volume is the minimum volume an athlete can carry out and still measurably improve. Maximum adaptive volume is the amount of training that provides the greatest adaptive training response. Our maximum adaptive volume, MAV, is the maximum amount of sets and reps we can do in a certain week or certain session that actually increases our adaptations to the highest level. Anything more than doing your MAV, that's going to be put to waste, because you're already going to be at the max adaptations you can really achieve from that training, and any more work than that is basically junk. You're basically wasting your time or increasing fatigue for no real reason, because you're already at that point where you're increasing your adaptations to its highest amount, to its limit. Maintenance volume is the lowest volume an athlete can do and still maintain their abilities. And lastly, junk volume. So I talked about this with Elias Page a little bit, but I hadn't actually explained what it is. So this is when you train between your maintenance volume, which is the minimum volume you need to maintain your skills, and your minimum effective volume, which is the minimum volume you need to make improvements. So some people are training more than they need to maintain their skills, but not training enough to where they improve. So they're just wasting their time with this extra work because they're not improving, because it's not enough to create adaptations, but they are still able to maintain their skills, but they could have maintained their skills anyway by doing less. So it's junk volume, so it's just kind of time you're wasting or energy you're wasting. So you don't want to be in that position. You want the training you're doing to be effective and to actually increase your performance. Hopefully that all makes sense, and I will probably make a video on how you're able to figure out, okay, how many sets and reps do I need to do so that I'm not over my MRV, my maximum recoverable volume, and so that I'm doing the right amount and I'm not overtraining. Because if you're training over your MRV, that is overtraining. That is what overtraining is. So you might be wondering, okay, why do I need to know all these terms and why is it important? When we train a certain sport, and in this case it's calisthenics, we don't want to train all different parts of that sport at the same time. We don't want to be training our mobility, our flexibility to their max potential. We don't want to be doing dynamics and statics and, general hypertrophy training all at the same time. It's too much. So what we want to do is focus on, maybe 1 to 2 things and do them really well, and then move on to the other things if those are also our goals. But how do we do that effectively? Well, we have to maintain the other skills while we work on those 1 to 2 other things. So how do we do that? That's where the minimum effective volume comes in. So for example, maybe you wanted to maintain your number of pull-ups while you were focusing on planche training. Well, to do that, you want to realize and know what your minimum effective volume is for pull-ups, so you can maintain your strength with pull-ups, but then also progressively overload with your planche training. So you want to maintain those pull-up skills, but then progress with your planche. So that's where learning all these volumes and how your body works is quite important, because it allows us to navigate our different goals a lot better. So on the screen, you should see a graphic of the recovery strategy hierarchy. So you should be able to see what's highest priority for improving your recovery. And that's going to be training within your MRV. Then it's going to be passive recovery. After that, active recovery and nutrition, which are similar priority. So already off the bat from this graph, we know that training below your MRV is the most important thing you should be doing. If you're overtraining, so training too much so that you can't recover, that's already gonna be a pitfall that you're falling under. Some of you will be sat there thinking, am I training above my maximum recoverable volume? I'll probably have a full video on this, but some common things you'll be able to note to see if you are training too much or too hard or too many sets. And that's gonna be when you come to your next training session, are you able to push harder? Are you able to do more sets? Like, even if it's just a 1 second hold more, or one more set or one more rep, are you able to do more in that next workout than you were before? If so, then you can sort of assume that you were able to fully recover and that session prior, the volume was below your MRV. If you were coming to that next session and you weren't able to train as hard, it was like, I can't do this, I can't do what I did 2 days ago, well then you probably trained too hard or do too much volume in that other session, so you know that session, the volume's too much. So that's generally where you can start to know, but I'll have a full video breaking this down. So next on the hierarchy list that you should prioritize once you know whether you're training above or below your MRV is gonna be passive recovery. So these are gonna be recovery methods that are very passive. Sleep, so let's talk about that. That's gonna be the number one. So straight after knowing whether you're training too hard is gonna be sleep. And for sleep, you want to be getting good quality sleep and consistent sleep. And it may not always be possible to be getting that consistent sleep or that highest quality sleep, but that needs to be the goal. So already, I bet you guys are surprised that these first 2 points are the most important things for recovery, which is training below your MRV and sleep. A lot of people, especially in calisthenics and in the gym world, when you ask them about recovery, they go straight to protein. And that's not the case. It's not most important for recovery. It is for body composition. That's going to be one of the highest things, is to be focusing on protein. But for recovery and making sure you can get stronger is going to be the sleep, and especially not overtraining, so training below your MRV. So you know you're not overtraining and you're training hard enough to keep progressively overloading and to get stronger. And you're getting about 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. So what's next to prioritize for recovery? Well, it's going to be relaxation. In terms of relaxation, things you can think of is gonna be playing music, reading a book, just laying down, things like that. Very low effort, low activity. Psychologically as well, these are low psychological things as well, because recovery is very psychological as well. So these are things that are very low in activity. So far, what we know is in a really good training plan, it's gonna have training below your MRV as a priority. It's gonna really make sure you're getting your sleep if you have a coach or something like that. And it's gonna make sure that you have time to relax. Doing whatever it is, 60 minutes before bed or whatever, just time to relax or time to yourself to not think about work or any psychological stresses. That's gonna be key for improving your recovery. More than foam rolling, more than some of these other things, those do have their place in certain scenarios, but these are going to be infinitely better in the long term for improving your recovery. Next to prioritize in terms of passive recovery is going to be stress management. So stress management is a big thing. Some people are quite good at managing stress, some not, but it is a skill that you do need to work on. It's not your choice how you feel about something, but it is sort of your choice how long you let it bother you. And it is a skill that you can get better at, that when something happens that is quite stressful, you can kind of snap out of it and get yourself out of it quite quick if you practice it. So that's a very good skill to have, and I recommend that you guys work on that, being able to get rid of stresses. If it's something you can't avoid, then deal with it as fast as you can so you can get back and increase your recovery, because all these things, having a very stressful week, it does affect your recovery. And lastly, what to prioritize in passive recovery is planned rest. So what this basically is days off training, days when you're completely not doing anything to do with training, and you should have at least 1 to 2 of these a week. This will give you some time away from training, because there is some kind of stress with having to get prepped and ready to go to the gym or get all your stuff ready to have a training session, get in the right mindset. That does accumulate some kind of fatigue and is quite stressful in itself, training. So in a way to kind of combat that, you do need time away to just do something else and not think about your training. So next, let's talk about active recovery. These are things that you actively need to do or plan ahead of time in order to carry them out to improve your recovery and be able to carry on your overload training to your max potential. So the first thing, the most important thing in the active recovery world that you need to prioritize is deloads. Deloads need to be put in after a period of overreaching. Again, if you don't know what that is, watch the fatigue video. So overall, make sure every 3 to 6 weeks, whenever you're done overreaching, make sure you include a deload that's about 50 to 40% of the volume you were doing during your training cycle in order to really get rid of that fatigue and come back stronger with more adaptation. So the next thing you should prioritize in the active recovery strategies is gonna be light sessions. So this is something that Thomas Kurganov actually does, which is having heavy sessions and light sessions and alternating between the two. So maybe he does, I think, heavy, and then a couple light sessions and then goes back into heavy training. However you do it, you should incorporate some kind of light session so it's not all very high intensity. So now we finally get to nutrition, which is that top part of the hierarchy pyramid for recovery. So let's go into what specific things should you care about in your nutrition to optimize your recovery. And the number one thing you should prioritize in your nutrition is gonna be your calorie intake, or the number of calories you're having per day. And basically, the more the better. However, that's not to say that you should keep eating as many calories as you want, because of course, performance is impeded depending on your body composition. If you're in a calorie surplus, and for calisthenics, we don't really want to be in a surplus for too long because increased body weight gain may hinder some of our performance in these body weight skills. The next thing we're going to talk about is the macronutrient. That's the next thing you want to prioritize if you're thinking about your nutrition and in terms of recovery. And for recovery, your most important macronutrient is going to be carbohydrates. Yep, carbohydrates, not protein. For recovery, carbohydrates are more important than protein. So for body composition, like we mentioned before, protein is going to be the most important, but for recovery, carbohydrates, because carbohydrates is what your body breaks down into glucose and is the energy currency of the body. So to replenish the glycogen stores and the muscle glucose that you guys expend during your hard calisthenics workouts, you need to eat carbohydrates. That's why carbohydrates are not the energy. And if you're cutting and reducing your carbohydrate intake to low levels, you're gonna be really hindering your recovery and how well you can perform in the next session. For protein, you know that's gonna be put towards your muscular hypertrophy due to that muscular breakdown. So it's very important. So make sure you're getting those carbohydrates. Next is going to be the protein, and then you can fill out the rest of your calories with the fats. And this is where Viva Life comes in. Viva Life is my brand of choice to go for supplements, because you guys know they have plant-based supplements that are actually science-based, and that's the key here. They have only what you need, only the essentials, so you're not getting any of that other stuff that you don't need and wasting your money. You're just getting the product that you actually want, and that's going to help with your recovery. So those are going to be things like the electrolytes, the creatine, because creatine stores, that's another thing you want to replenish to help optimize your recovery, and of course the protein supplements. And lastly, we have therapeutics and supplementary recovery strategies. These are going to be things that are a little bit more gimmicky, not to say they're not effective or don't work. Some of these things are actually science-based and do work. There are some material there to actually back up that they do help. However, a lot of the other things we talked about are going to help you a lot more rather than prioritizing these. So things like foam rolling, cold therapy, acupuncture, things like that, they still can work and help you out a ton, especially for your specific situation. Maybe they'll help you out a lot. However, the other things are going to help more. And again, as I said, some of these things are just going to be basically relaxation. So another form of relaxation will help just as much. Thank you to all my channel members, and if you haven't already, watch the Fatigue and Calisthenics Explained video, because it's the prerequisite video to this video, and you guys are gonna love the next video because it's gonna go through some of the key things for calisthenics training that you guys won't want to miss, that's gonna help prioritize and overcome any plateaus you have in your planche training.